The lawyer's hands were trembling when he slid the envelope across the desk toward me. He had worked in this town for 30 years and I had never once seen him nervous, but that morning he could barely look me in the eyes. "Mrs. Eleanor Graves," he said quietly. "Your father gave me very specific instructions. I was only allowed to open this file if you ever found yourself with nowhere left to go." I stared at the envelope. My name was written on the front in my father's handwriting I had not seen in 22 years. And just like that, everything changed. But to understand how I ended up sitting in that lawyer's office at 63 years old with nothing but a small bag of clothes beside my chair, I need to take you back to the morning my son looked me in the eyes and told me my life was over. It started on a Tuesday. I remember because I had just finished watering the roses along the front porch, the same roses I had planted the year my husband passed. My son pulled into the driveway in his silver car, and the moment I saw his face through the windshield, I felt something cold move through my chest. He was not smiling. He was never serious like that unless something had already been decided. My son was 38 years old, tall like his father, and had his father's confident walk. He worked in real estate and wore pressed shirts even on weekends. I was proud of him once. I want to be honest about that. I was deeply proud of the man I thought he was becoming. His wife stepped out of the passenger side before he even turned off the engine. My daughter-in-law wore sunglasses even though the sky was overcast. She had always been polite to my face in a way that never felt warm. She carried a folder tucked under her arm. "Mom," my son said, "we need to have a serious conversation." I set down my watering can. "Of course," I said. "Come inside." But he shook his head. He said it might be easier to talk out here. That was the first sign. When someone does not want to come inside your home, it usually means they are about to say something they do not want to carry back out with them. My daughter-in-law opened the folder without being asked. She pulled out a stack of papers and held them toward me. My son looked at the ground. "Mum, we have been talking about this for a while now. Since Dad passed, this house has been a lot for you to manage alone." I looked at him. "I managed just fine. You fell last winter," he said. "I slipped on ice. It was one time." My daughter-in-law stepped forward slightly. "Eleanor, there is a wonderful facility about 40 minutes from here. Quiet, clean. The staff is very attentive. We already toured it." I went still. The papers in her hand suddenly looked very different. "You want to put me in a nursing home?" My son finally looked at me. "It is not a nursing home, Mom. It is an assisted living community. I am 63 years old," I said. "I walk 3 miles every morning." He ran a hand through his hair. "Mum, the house is a lot to maintain. The roof needs work. The heating system is old. And honestly, the property taxes have been climbing every year." Then I understood. It was not about my health at all. "You want the house." "Nobody said that," my daughter-in-law said quickly. But nobody denied it either. My son finally spoke again. "If we sold the house, we could cover the cost of the facility for years and still have money left over. For you, a little nest egg. A little nest egg. After 40 years in that house, after raising 2 children in those rooms, after burying my husband from that front porch, I told them I needed time to think." My son nodded, but the look he exchanged with his daughter-in-law when they thought I was not watching told me the decision had already been made somewhere I was never invited into. Over the next 3 weeks, the pressure grew slowly and quietly the way water fills a basement. My son called every few days. My daughter-in-law sent articles about senior communities with beautiful photographs of smiling elderly people painting watercolors. My grandson, who was 12, stopped coming over after school the way he used to. I found out later that my daughter-in-law had told him Grandma was going through some changes and needed space. I had a daughter. Her name was Carol, and she lived in Portland with her husband and her 2 dogs. When I called her and told her what was happening, she went quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Mom, if you don't want to go, just say no. It is your house. You own it." But that was the problem. I thought I owned it. What I did not know yet was that my son had found a paperwork error from years ago, something technical about the deed that had been incorrectly filed when my husband originally purchased the property. He had hired an attorney to quietly correct it. In his favor, I did not find out about any of that until much later. What I knew that morning was this. My son arrived with a notary, and my daughter-in-law and 3 boxes for my personal belongings, and he told me the facility had an opening that week, and that it really was the best thing for everyone. He said it the way people say things when they have already rehearsed them many times. I sat in my kitchen for a long moment. The roses were blooming outside the window. My husband's photograph was on the shelf above the sink. My father's old toolbox was still in the garage because I could never bring myself to donate it. I picked up my bag. I took my husband's photograph. I took the small wooden cross my mother gave me the year she passed, and I walked out of my own home with 3 boxes of belongings while my daughter-in-law directed the movers through the hallway behind me. My son drove me to the facility himself. He talked the whole way about the amenities and the activities calendar and the dining options. I watched the town pass by the window and said almost nothing. The room they had prepared for me was small and clean and smelled like floor wax. There was a window that faced a parking lot. A woman down the hall was crying softly, and no one seemed to be going to check on her. My son hugged me at the door. He said he would visit on Sundays. He almost made it to the elevator before he turned back. "Mom, I want you to know this is the right decision." I looked at him from the doorway of my small room. "For who?" I asked. He did not answer that. The elevator doors closed. I sat on the edge of the bed that night, and I thought about my father. Thomas Brennan. He was a carpenter from Vermont, a quiet man who measured twice and cut once, and never raised his voice unless something was genuinely wrong. He died when I was 41. We had not always been close in my adult years, but in the last years of his life something softened between us, and we talked more than we ever had when I was young. The week before he passed, he pulled me aside at the hospital. He pressed a business card into my hand. It was the card of an attorney in Burlington named Mr. Howell. "Your grandfather and I set something aside for you years ago," my father said. "Mr. Howell knows what to do. But Eleanor, listen to me carefully. You are only to use this if you truly have no other choice. Do you understand me?" I told him I understood. I kept that card in my wallet for 22 years. I moved it from wallet to wallet. I almost threw it away twice. But something always stopped me. Some quiet feeling in my chest that said not yet. That night in the facility, lying on a bed that was not mine, staring at a ceiling that was not mine, I opened my wallet and held the card under the lamp. The paper was soft at the edges from years of handling. The phone number had a Vermont area code. The name was printed in simple black letters. Robert Howell, attorney at law. I called the next morning. The phone rang 4 times, and I was preparing myself for a disconnected number or a stranger's voice, but then an older man answered. His voice was steady and calm, and when I told him my father's name, he went very quiet. "Miss Brennan," he said, using my maiden name without being asked. "I have been waiting a long time for this call." He asked me one question. "Are you in a situation where you have nowhere left to go?" I looked around the room. The parking lot outside the window. The smell of floor wax. The crying woman down the hall who had finally gone silent. "Yes," I told him. "I believe I am." He said, "Can you come to Burlington?" My daughter Carol drove me. She did not hesitate for a single moment when I called her. She was in her car within the hour, and she drove 4 hours to pick me up and 4 hours more to Burlington without stopping except once for gas. She held my hand in the parking lot of the attorney's office and told me whatever it was, she was not going anywhere. Mr. Howell's office was on the 2nd floor of an old brick building near the river. He was in his mid-70s with white hair and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He stood when we entered and shook my hand with both of his. He did not waste time. He opened a thick folder on his desk and he walked me through it carefully. My grandfather, it turned out, had purchased a lakeside property in Vermont in 1971, a small resort of 12 cabins on 14 acres of private shoreline. He had purchased it under a trust structure, quietly, in my name, years before I was even married. My father had maintained the trust and grown it through careful investment. The property had been managed by a local company for decades and had operated continuously as a vacation rental. The trust had accumulated significant earnings over the years. Mr. Howell turned the screen toward me. I saw the number, and I felt the room tilt slightly. "There is more," he said carefully. He told me that in recent years, a large hospitality company had approached the management company about purchasing the lakeside property. They had been in negotiations for some time. The sale was scheduled to be finalized at a signing ceremony the following Friday. The buyer was a regional hotel chain. The seller, according to all documents, was listed as the trust. "But the trust," Mr. Howell said gently, "belongs to you. It has always belonged to you. The management company did not have authority to agree to a sale. They overstepped significantly. I sat back in my chair. Who arranged the sale? I asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then he slid another paper across the desk. The contact person who initiated the sale discussions on behalf of the property was listed as an authorized representative. The name on the document made my daughter inhale sharply beside me. It was my son. He had found the property in some paperwork after my husband passed. He had discovered the trust and apparently assumed that since I had never mentioned it, I did not know about it. He had positioned himself as a representative, hired a local attorney of his own, and arranged the entire transaction without ever telling me the property existed. He was going to sell my grandfather's land and keep the money. While I sat in a facility looking at a parking lot, I looked at Mr. Howell. What do I do? He folded his hands. The signing is Friday. If you want to stop it, you need to appear in person as the trust beneficiary. You have every legal right to do so. The sale cannot proceed without your signature. I thought about my father's voice in my memory. Use this only if you truly have no other choice. I looked at my daughter. She was already nodding before I said a word. We drove to Vermont 2 days later, Carol and I. We stayed at a small inn near the lake. The evening before the signing, I walked down to the water by myself. The cabins were dark, and the lake was very still. The mountains across the water were reflected perfectly on the surface. My grandfather had stood in this exact place. My father had stood here too. They had both kept this secret for decades, and they had kept it specifically for me. I sat on the dock for a long time, not with anger, something quieter than anger, something that felt like coming home. The signing was scheduled at a conference room inside a hotel in Burlington. When Carol and I arrived, the lobby was already busy with the hotel company's representatives. Men in suits with laptops open, assistants carrying bound copies of the agreement, a photographer ready to document the handshake. And there, standing near the window talking on his phone, was my son. He wore his best pressed shirt. He was smiling. He saw me the exact moment I saw him. The smile did not disappear immediately. It faded slowly, the way light fades when a cloud moves in front of the sun. His hand lowered from his ear. His face went very still. "Mom." His voice came out wrong, too high, too careful. "What are you doing here?" I walked across the lobby at a steady pace. Carol stayed one step behind me. "I came to the signing," I said. He laughed, but the laugh was hollow. "This is a business meeting. You do not need to be here." I handed him nothing. I walked past him toward the conference room. He moved to block the doorway. "Mum, please, let us talk first." The hotel company's lead attorney was standing at the head of the table inside. 2 other representatives were already seated. A woman from their acquisition team looked up when I entered. "Excuse me," said my son from behind me. "This is a family matter and she is just—" Mr. Howell stepped in from the hallway behind us. He had driven up that morning. He set his briefcase on the table and opened it without hurry. "Good morning," he said to the room. "I am Robert Howell, attorney representing the trust beneficiary of the Brennan Lakeside property. My client is present and would like to address the room before any documents are signed." The hotel attorney frowned. "We were told the trust representative was—" Mr. Howell placed a document on the table. "The trust beneficiary is Eleanor Graves, née Brennan. She is the sole authorized party with legal standing to approve or deny the sale of this property." The room went quiet. My son stepped forward. "There must be a misunderstanding. We have been in contact with the management company for months. Everything was properly arranged." Mr. Howell looked at him patiently. The management company had operational authority over the property. They did not have ownership authority. Any sale requires the written consent of the trust beneficiary. No such consent was ever given, because no one ever told her the property existed. The hotel attorney leaned back slowly. He looked at my son. "Is this accurate?" My son's jaw tightened. He looked at me. He was not afraid yet. He was still calculating. "Mum, I was going to tell you. The money from this sale would have gone to you. I was protecting your interests." I looked at him quietly. "You put me in a room that smelled like floor wax," I said. "You told me it was for my own good, and you were selling my grandfather's land without telling me it was mine." His voice dropped. "You never even knew about it. That does not make it yours." He looked at Carol. She crossed her arms and looked back at him without saying a word. The hotel attorney cleared his throat. Mr. Graves, I think we need to pause this meeting. He looked at me. Mrs. Graves, I apologize for the confusion. We were not fully informed of the ownership structure. I nodded. I understand. He asked carefully. Is it your wish to proceed with the sale? I looked at the documents on the table. Then I looked at the window. The lake was visible in the distance, flat and silver under the morning sky. No, I said. It is not. My son made a sound, low and sharp. You are making a mistake. That property generates almost nothing compared to what we negotiated. The buyer was offering a strong number. You could have been comfortable for the rest of your life. I turned to face him fully. I am 63 years old. I am in good health. I walk 3 miles every morning. And I just discovered that I own 14 acres of lakefront property that my grandfather purchased before I was born, and that my father tended for decades specifically, so I would have something to stand on if the ground ever disappeared. Beneath me, I paused. The ground disappeared. But so did the idea that you were the one to protect me. He opened his mouth and closed it again. The hotel representatives began gathering their folders. Apologies for the disruption, the lead attorney said. If circumstances change, please have your attorney reach out to us. He shook my hand briefly, and the team filed out of the room. My son stood at the window. He did not move for a long time. Carol stepped beside me. My son finally turned around. His voice had lost all its edges. Mum, I genuinely thought you could not manage on your own. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about the way he had looked at me from across the kitchen the morning he told me it was time to go. Not cruel exactly, but decided, as if I had already become something smaller than what I was. No, I said gently. You thought it would be easier if I agreed with you. Those are not the same thing. He looked at his shoes. Carol put her hand on my shoulder. We left the conference room and walked into the hallway. Mr. Howell walked beside me and spoke quietly as we moved toward the elevator. There are several things we need to discuss in terms of the property, the accounts, and your options going forward. But there is one more thing your father asked me to give you in person, only once you had made your decision. He handed me a sealed envelope. Old paper, slightly yellowed. My name on the front in my father's handwriting. I held it without opening it until we reached the lobby. Then I sat in a chair near the window with the lake in the distance, and I opened it slowly. My father had written 3 pages by hand. He wrote about my grandfather building those cabins one summer, with 2 neighbors and a borrowed truck. He wrote about the morning my grandfather deeded everything into the trust and told my father he wanted to make sure at least one person in the family had something that no one could argue away from them. He wrote about watching me grow up and noticing early that I gave too much of myself to everyone around me without ever asking for anything back. There was a line near the end of the 2nd page that made me stop reading for a moment. Eleanor, he had written, your grandfather always said a woman should have something in her own name, not because the people around her will fail her, but because knowing it exists changes the way you carry yourself. It gives you a place to stand. I folded the letter carefully and held it in my hands. The lake outside the window caught the morning light. I thought about the facility room, the parking lot, the smell of floor wax, the woman down the hall who had been crying. Then I thought about the dock the night before, the mountains reflected in the still water, the absolute quiet of a place that had been waiting for me without my knowing it. My daughter sat beside me. She did not say anything. She did not need to. In the weeks that followed, I worked with Mr. Howell to take full ownership of the property. The management company was released from their contract, and a new arrangement was put in place with a local family business that had managed lakefront properties for 30 years. The cabins were in good condition. The land was healthy. The trust accounts were substantial. I moved into the property manager's cottage at the edge of the grounds for the first season. It was small and it smelled like cedar, and the lake was visible from the kitchen window every single morning. My son called 3 weeks later. His voice was quieter than I had heard it since he was young. He did not make excuses. He asked if I would be willing to talk. Not about the property. Just talk. I said yes. I believed in second chances then, and I believe in them now. But I also understood something I had not fully known before. Forgiveness and trust are 2 separate things, and they do not always arrive at the same time. My daughter Carol visited that first summer and sat on the dock every evening with a cup of tea. My grandson spent 2 weeks at the lake and swam every afternoon and told me it was the best summer he could remember. I taught him how to identify the birds that came to the shoreline at dawn. At the end of that summer, I reached out to a local organization that served women over 50 who were facing housing instability or financial displacement. I offered 2 of the 12 cabins as temporary housing for women in transition. The organization called it a pilot program. I called it something my grandfather would have recognized immediately: taking care of what you have, by sharing what you can. Mr. Howell called the day we opened the program officially. He told me your father would have been very pleased. I thanked him and I meant it. But what I thought about after I hung up was not pride. I thought about my father sitting in a hospital bed pressing a business card into my hand and saying, "Use this only if you truly have no other choice." He had known something I had not yet learned, that a woman who knows where she stands does not need permission to stand there. She just needs one moment of clarity and the courage to stop walking away. I had spent 63 years being quiet in all the ways that had seemed polite at the time. Quiet in meetings where I was talked past. Quiet in rooms where decisions were made without me. Quiet on the morning I carried 3 boxes out of my own home while my daughter-in-law directed movers through the hallway. I was not quiet anymore. Not loud either, just clear, the way the lake is clear in the early morning before anything has disturbed it, still and deep and entirely itself. My name is Eleanor Graves. Most people around here call me Miss Eleanor now. I bake blueberry pie for the guests when the season opens. I walk the shoreline every morning at 6, and I count the herons, and I think about my grandfather, who carried lumber through these trees before I was born, and decided quietly that some things should belong to the people who need them most. If you are listening to this, and you are sitting in a room that does not feel like yours, if someone has told you that you are too old or too small, or too tired to matter anymore, I want you to hear something clearly. They were wrong about me, and they are wrong about you. Sometimes the people who love us fail us quietly over years, and we do not notice until the door closes. And sometimes what we discover on the other side of that closed door is something so much larger than what was taken that we almost cannot hold it. My father left me a place to stand, not because he knew exactly what would happen, but because he knew I would need it. And when I finally needed it, it was there. If this story moved something in you, please take a moment to like it and leave a comment telling me where you are listening from. Subscribe so you do not miss the next one, because the quietest people sometimes carry the heaviest histories, and sometimes the woman they underestimated is the one who owns the land they are standing on.